There are many historical artefacts in the warehouse, but as you climb up the steps to the works and overlook the warehouse shed, you will come face to face with a rather impressive statue. This is the statue of Britannia, the lion at her side and Mercury on her left. It used to take pride of place over the offices at Euston Station. As you wander around, you may find more artefacts from the station. Euston Station was at one point the heart of the railway in the capital. It was the first intercity railway station and it opened in 1837. It connected to Birmingham and was once owned by the London and Birmingham Railway. The site for this impressive new station was chosen by none other than Rorge and Robert Stephenson themselves. They knew that having a large terminus that was close to the capital's heart was important. However, they also predicted that the railway could bring growth to the area surrounding it. So, rather than trying to buy land within the city, which was expensive to obtain and impractical to build on, they decided to buy farmland on the city's outskirts. It was relatively cheap by London standards and allowed them to build the station that they envisioned without having to buy up buildings just to demolish them. It was also a calculated gamble. They had to rely on the proposed expansion of the railway could bring and hope the city would grow around them. The Stephenson family hired architect Philip Harwick and building contractor William Cuthbert to realise their plans. The station had a massive wrought iron roof with wide open spaces encompassing the two platforms below. Harwick wanted to make a statement to impress, so he created a colossal arch at the entrance of the station, known as the Euston Arch. Many people called this arch the Gateway to the North. It was 72 feet high and was supported by 4 Greek-inspired chisel columns made from Bramley Falls stone. At first, only the station allowed for 3 inward and outward trains each, and could reach Boxmoor in just over an hour. Due to its success, the line was expanded just outside Bletchley, but it connected Rugby as well via a coach route. In just 1 year of operation, the line was over 112 miles long. Amazingly, despite it being called a train station, at first steam engines were not allowed in the station at all. This was due to an incline at Regent's Canal. The engines simply were not powerful enough to climb this gradient, and voiced by public concern of the noise and air pollution of the engines trying to get up this hill, the carriages were uncoupled from the locomotives and were connected to static steam engine and cables, and their cables hauled them into the station. This continued until 1844 when the laws were relaxed and pilot engines were introduced to help the locomotives tackle the gradient. The construction of the railway station had a secondary effect on trade in the area. People in the hospitality trade realised the potential in these railway stations and built 2 hotels surrounding Euston, providing accommodation to its travellers. These were known as the first railway hotels to be built in London. The hotels east of the station targeted the wealthy and were the height of splendour. This again worked greatly as the station began to expand. New goods yards and new platform was built, and in 1849 the station celebrated its new station hall. The station hall boasted the largest waiting room in England. Just the waiting room alone measured 126 feet in length, 61 feet wide, and its flat-panelled roof was over 64 feet high. It was elaborately decorated and offered passengers a chance to relax before their journey, and offered now the new formed LNWR a place to set its central office. The station was adorned with 8 large statues created by sculptor John Thomas to celebrate the 8 cities now connected by the station. It wasn't all success, however. The station was once again filled to capacity, so it was decided a further expansion was needed. So they decided to go west. It was not a popular move, as a church and a graveyard lay in its path. To avoid any untoward scandal, the railway took exceptional measures to exhume all the bodies from the graveyard and to reinterm them at nearby St Pancras Cemetery. The station continued to thrive and expand well into the 20th century. Following the 1923 grouping, where the railway was merged into the London, Midland and Scottish Railway, the station had become outdated. So, the LMS decided to completely rebuild the station. However, the onset of war and the Blitz temporarily halted the plans. Eventually, in 1959, work was given the green light, and this included the demolition of the arch, the accommodation of new electrified lines, and further expansion southwards, where the Great Hall once stood. Work, however, did not settle too well with the locals. They wanted to restore the arch rather than demolish it, but as there was nowhere to store the structure, and with the added cost of removing and relocating it, it was decided that the arch should be destroyed. There were several attempts to get the arch rebuilt, but unfortunately none of these plans have ever come to fruition. Many people have said that the demolition of the original buildings was a travesty, and the rebuild did not settle well with many people, as the skylit arches and grand halls were replaced with linear grey concrete lines, which held none of the character that the previous station had. This was hardly surprising, as the person who approved the plans, a gentleman called Harold Macmillan, preferred to see buildings have function over aesthetic. This can also be seen if you are travelling down the UK's roads and motorways, as he greenlit many of them. The station's new look, however, did do some good, as it saved the reconstruction of St Pancras Station, which it was also threatened with demolition. Following the public mood towards the new buildings, St Pancras was restored rather than rebuilt. A new governing body was also created called the Victorian Society, which championed in the preservation of historic monuments and buildings. Today, there's not much left of the former station. Some of the original statues are still there, including a statue of Robert Stevenson and the Wall Memorial. 7 of the original statues still stand on the forecourt. Following the demolition of the station and redevelopment, the National Railway Museum has managed to save the statue of Britannia, the original gates, a George Stephenson statue, and incredibly a turntable, which was discovered during the demolition. All of these you can still view today. I will discuss the turntable and George Stephenson later in a later video, but for now, let's have a look at the gates and the statue of Britannia. The statue was sculpted in 1849. Seated on Britannia's left is a lion and a figure of Mercury, and on her right there is a figure representing the arts and sciences. She rests her arm on the head of the lion, which signifies Britain. Her other arm rests on the front of a ship. This is to show Britain's dominance with its naval fleets. On Britannia's left you will see the figure of Mercury. Mercury is known as the messenger god, and it seems very fitting that a god who is known for travelling would reside in a railway. Mercury is also associated with financial and commercial success, and this could be indicated by the fact he is holding a hammer. On Britannia's right is a woman whose identity is unknown. She points to a scroll of paper while looking at a sphere. While we can't be certain, we suspect that the sphere represents the globe and the paper could resemble a map. Bear in mind that when the statue was created, the Commonwealth was in full swing, and this could be a reference to the British Empire. Euston Station held on to the statue for some years after the demolition of the hall. When the station was rebuilt, the statue was situated over a restaurant until 1986. Following further plans for redevelopment, the National Railway Museum offered to preserve the statue, and it was stored in the warehouse until it went back on general view in 1999. It is an ironic chance that below Britannia hangs a sign for platform 9 3/4. We all know that famous platform was from the Harry Potter series. However, on the website Pottermore, J.K. Rowling admitted that when she created the story, she had envisioned Euston Station for the famous Hogwarts Express, but had mistakenly put King's Cross instead. Almost by lucky chance, the museum created its own nod to this fact by placing the sign for the platform underneath the statue that once stood proudly at Euston. The station gates were from the arch itself. Considering the grouping in 1923, it was impressive that these survived at all, as the gates are emblazoned with crests from the London and Birmingham Railway. They were manufactured by inventor and locksmith J.J. Brammer, and it gives us some insights into how elaborate the station was prior to its demolition in 1961. It is hoped that one day the arch and the station could be restored back to its former glory, and I do feel that if it does come to pass, then these gates may well find a new home. But for now, they are treasured and lovingly looked after.